Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Today we're going to talk about a technology that all preppers should consider for their arsenal. You know, I have a friend who's a world traveler, has been everywhere and done everything. This guy's been in the military, he's a police officer, and him and his friends were recently out on a backcountry camping trip. And unfortunately, they got turned around, they got lost. They had to utilize their SOS transponder to call in for help. If they were to have a drone, they wouldn't have had this problem, and they would have realized that they were only actually 300 meters away from a road, which would have led them to safety. Today we're going to talk about why every prepper must consider drones for their survival and emergency kits. So let's get to it. Drones are an underrated tool that can be leveraged by preppers. Today we're going to talk about some applications for these devices across a wide array of emergency and survival scenarios. Obviously, food, water, shelter, security, and first aid are the most important cornerstones of prepping, but technology like drones can be a huge force multiplier in an SHTF situation. Let's talk about the obvious downsides of drones. For starters, they require a power supply. Unless you have some sort of renewable power source, like a solar panel for instance, it's likely that you're going to be limited in the duration in which you're able to employ such a technology. They're also going to require GPS signals to maximize their capabilities. If after a disaster struck, the GPS satellites were not properly calibrated, then they would lose this functionality and be much harder to fly. They're also going to have limited range and runtime. Depending on the models you get, most civilian models aren't going to go much further than 10 miles and may not be able to run more than 30 to 45 minutes. These are also going to utilize radio frequencies like Wi-Fi, which may give away your location. As surprisingly durable as some drones are, they're also going to need spare parts because they are incredibly fragile, particularly the propellers. You're going to want a lot of extra props stored for if you have to use this in a rugged environment. Their performance is going to be impacted by the weather. They are relatively expensive and out of a lot of people's price range depending on what models you get, although the DJI Mini that we show here is actually quite affordable and doesn't require a license to use. Getting to know your drone is obviously going to be of utmost importance if you ever had to use it in a stressful situation. Drones can also be loud depending on the type of model that you have. When paired with the fact that they are visibly detectable in the sky, they may be limited in their use for security purposes. Drones are also not immune to gunfire. Anybody who's ever been duck or goose hunting knows that all it would take to knock one of these drones out of the sky at a moderate range is some birdshot out of a shotgun. Because of the auditory and visual detectability, drones can also give away your location, which might not be a good thing if you're trying to remain gray man. And lastly, most modern drones that are for civilians can only be employed actively, meaning that you have to have a person manning it at all times. Although we're going to talk about some passive autonomous flight patterns that you can pre-program into your drone, you still need to have somebody that's going to manage the launch of the drone, the battery recharging, and the maintenance. Now let's talk about some of the benefits for drone technology for emergencies. One of the most obvious benefits is going to be operational security, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Drones can alert you to potential threats in your environment. Using a drone means that you don't have to risk a casualty when surveilling a dangerous situation. Drones can also act as early warning systems, detecting threats long before they are in the range of engagement. Drones can identify things like the size of an enemy force, their capabilities, and their direction of travel. And drones are going to be particularly good for dense urban areas that may be too dangerous to physically traverse. And because they are only typically able to operate within a 10-mile range, this is ideally suited to an urban environment. Drones will also allow for a bird's eye view, which can identify various checkpoints in the terrain, optimize defensive positions, and identify the paths of least resistance, which can help to predict and direct enemy movements. Another use is for disaster management and search and rescue. After a disaster has struck, it's going to be very hard to get an understanding of what the damage is. A drone is going to allow you to assess the scope and scale of the disaster in a much more cost-effective way, especially when manpower and resources are going to be limited. Aerial vehicles can obviously access places where ground-based vehicles cannot. This is going to allow you to determine the amount of damage done and where vital resources should be allocated. It's going to help you to identify evacuation and potential escape routes. And because it's such a low bar for entry, meaning that it's so easy to fly a drone, most people can do it right out of the box after a little bit of tinkering. Whereas good luck trying to figure out how to fly a helicopter or an airplane in the same amount of time. They're also much cheaper to operate. Another great use, as I referenced in the beginning of this video, is for route finding, navigation, and/or signaling. Now, when food is limited, drones can do work that might take hours, and it's going to save you hundreds if not thousands of calories in the process. As I talked about in the beginning of this video, drones are going to help you prevent getting lost. It's going to help you avoid precarious terrain. This is going to help you conserve precious time and energy, which is going to be of utmost importance when you're in a survival scenario. Drones might also be used to signal for help. For example, you could rig a drone up to emit an alert beacon or an SOS light by simply mounting a small flashlight on it. This can be very useful for search and rescue at nighttime. You could also use the drone to physically deliver a message over a long distance. So for example, if you found yourself hiking in the mountains and you were injured, but you had your drone, you may be able to use that drone to get the attention of local authorities to come and provide you or somebody else assistance who needs it. After a disaster strikes, drones might also be useful in surveying, prospecting, and scavenging supplies. It's important that if you are seeking resources post-collapse, that you're not wasting more energy than you are potentially acquiring. Drones can save you time and energy in this process. They may also be useful in identifying wild game from a distance, which will assist you with hunting, maybe even finding suitable fishing spots. They can also, of course, be used to identify bodies of water and resources. This is a very underrated application for drones. There's plenty of ways that you can utilize drone technology for communication purposes. For example, you might be able to mount an antenna or a repeater to a drone to increase the range of your radio communications. Drones can also carry moderate payloads over long distances. As mentioned previously, you can use a drone to physically carry a message from one place to another. Drones can also be used for signaling. Just the mere sight or the sound of the drone alone can alert help to your location. And lastly, drones may also have some utility for mesh networking purposes, relaying signals on lo-fi networks. This is basically setting up your own localized internet of sorts. We're going to talk about this more in the future, so stay tuned. Now, from a militaristic standpoint, there's also weaponized and offensive applications for drones. This, of course, in normal times is going to be considered highly illegal. But if there was a breakdown of the rule of law and citizens had to defend their own communities, there may be some utility here for drones. Loitering munitions are already deployed in modern warfare, but augmenting civilian drones with this capability would require a significant amount of expertise and technological know-how. In most cases, drones are used for kamikaze purposes. That is, taking some sort of explosive ordnance to an enemy position. However, drones are also outfitted to deploy ranged projectiles, but again, this would require a significant amount of technological expertise and would also be highly illegal in 99.9% of situations, so I wouldn't encourage you to do this unless it was full-blown Mad Max and you had no other choice. Another potential use for drones is subterfuge, or creating a diversion. You could use drones in creative ways to lure enemies into an ambush, or just to create a diversion so you can escape a certain region. Drones might also be used to enter contaminated areas. Say after disaster struck, there was a location that had potentially hazardous materials like gases or radioactive material. Sending a drone in to survey that area would minimize casualties, so long as you are sure to decontaminate the drone upon its return. Something we haven't really talked about are autonomous flight patterns. You can indeed program drones to fly and surveil preset routes. There may even be pattern recognition and AI software which can aid in the detection of threats within the environment. Depending on how much money you want to spend and what your certifications are, you can get drones which are very capable in this respect. But these are going to come at a very, very high cost. For most people, that is the average prepper, I would encourage getting a small, backpackable drone that you can either keep in your vehicle or even a larger bug-out bag. For example, the DJI Mini is only 249 grams, and they made it 249 grams to comply with laws of most countries that require licenses to fly drones that exceed that weight. These are relatively affordable, easy to fly, and can serve a variety of the functions that we've just discussed. Let me know in the comments section below if you have any drone recommendations for survivalists and preppers, and if there's any use cases that we might have overlooked in this video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget I will post a link for the drones that we've shown in this video in the description section below. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Canadian Prepper out.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.